everybody. It's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, been commenting publicly on your Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. And we're back here once again this week to do just the same. And if we got a special show for you lined up. In this episode, we're going to look into the latest of what's happening within Vikingsland. The team's unique approach to the 2024 draft class, as deduced by Darren. Insights from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's pre-draft presser, which was interesting, and player meetings that have happened to date. Also, we're going to look back at the Stefon Diggs trade. Who won that one? Well, both teams most likely, but we're going to look at the effects that it had on the Minnesota Vikings then and now. And we're going to be assessing the outcome of the trade. Also, we're going to dive deep into the safety room, one of the probably most talented room on this year's squad already. All that and more on today's Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And we're back.
Unclick that.
We're back. And Darren's reminding me to unclick to mute, which I already had. He's a little slow on the draw today, but hopefully he won't be for the entire show. But anyways, Darren, how you doing, buddy?
Great, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And as you can see, Darren's having internet issues as well. This is going to be fun, but we shall see. All right. Dr. Produce said, holy shit, he's never seen snow that deep. That came from Charlie Hustle, who up in Anchorage, they have 130 inches of snow this year. That is almost 13 feet. That is a lot of snow. So
a lot of white stuff, Drew.
Yep.
Drew, Dave. I saw Drew's name flash across the screen.
Yeah. The Drewster's here. Norsevius is here. Nick's here. SKOL 77 is here. We've got Charlie Hustle, SKOL Mafia. Hello, Dave. Matty Man is here. Nick as well. I saw, who else did I see? I saw Fig Nuts, Russell F, and of course, Delton. Earlier, he chimed in. Welcome to one and all. And let's get this show started with theme 1. This week in Vikingsland.
Yeah, in some ways, when you get close to draft, Dave, it's kind of can be quiet, but there was still some stuff that went on that we noticed during the week and want to get at them here in this segment. First one being the Vikings' approach to evaluating the quarterbacks, the big six this year, the big six prospects. We know the Vikings are going to draft a quarterback this draft. It's a question of when, likely in the first round, probably within the top 10, remains to be seen, but they are going to get a quarterback this draft. They're going to take a shot at their quarterback of the future. Now, normally every year teams will attend all the hotshot quarterback prospects. They'll attend the prospects pro days. What was interesting is that the Vikings have not sent Kevin O'Connell, who is heavily invested in this process, or Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, or any of the front office to those pro days of the 6 top prospects. And Matt Miller, who is one of ESPN's draft dudes. I don't want to call him a guru because I hate that word, but he's one of the guys on the draft. And he said that this is the first time, instead of doing the Vikings are not going to the pro days, but they are holding five. They have scheduled or held five private workouts with five of the six quarterback hotshots. The only one they haven't lined up is Caleb Williams from USC, because everybody knows that the Bears are going to draft him first overall anyway, so there's no point really in holding a private workout for him. The Vikings aren't going to do a trade with the Bears to go up to number one, because the Bears are picking him. So don't waste your time there. But the other five, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, Penix, and Bo Nix, they've all scheduled or had private workouts with them. And Miller said that this is the first time that he's aware that a team has said, we're not going to the pro days, but we're going to hold the private workouts. Dave, so the Vikings are doing something a little bit different here, a little bit outside the box, but I like it. Now, why do I like it? And I'd like to get your opinions too on this, and we will. But the pro day workouts, Dave, to me, we know that they're heavily scripted. So the quarterbacks there, they're throwing in their own practice facilities. They're being worked out by their own coaches. They're throwing to the receivers they've thrown to for 1 year, 2 years, their whole career. The workouts, the drills that they're doing, the throws that they're being made. You know that they've been practicing these for weeks, months on end, so they can look as good as they possibly can at this pro day, and which will lead, hopefully, for them to get drafted as high as they could possibly get drafted. So it's very scripted. It's kind of like if you're an actor and you're reading from a teleprompter. Really know that's how these pro days go. So yeah, you can learn stuff from that. But again, because it's heavily scripted in an environment that's very comfortable for these quarterbacks, they're not really under a lot of duress. Sure, there's pressure to make your throws. You still got to be accurate, because every little thing you do wrong or right is going to be dissected by everybody who's watching. But still, it's a very comfortable setting for them. I like the private workouts because it's taking these quarterbacks out of their comfort zone. And we know that outside of the first drive or 15 plays in an NFL game, there is no script. Anything can happen. And things don't always go right on a play. So I like that. I like what the Vikings are doing here. I like what Kevin O'Connell's doing here. And he talked about they want to see guys, how they react to questions, how they get to the answers, how do they take what they've been told and execute that. And that's what this pro day, these private workouts that the Vikings are working these quarterbacks through, that's what it's going to do. They're going to be in an uncomfortable environment. The quarterbacks they aren't going to know what throws they're going to be asked to make. They're not going to know who they're throwing to. They're not going to know what questions they're going to get asked about offensive systems, or how would you do this, or how would you do that. They'll try to prepare for that, but there's only so much you can prepare for. It's making them uncomfortable. And I think that's a good thing, because a lot of how good a player is, and particularly a quarterback is, like, how do you, when a play goes right, you'd expect most quarterbacks can make that throw. They're going to complete it. But when the pocket breaks down, when somebody's in your face, when there's chaos, how do you react to chaos? It's kind of like the actor analogy again. When an actor is really good at improv, that's kind of what this private workout can try to simulate is, how do these prospects react when things aren't set up for them? There's no script. They don't quite know what's coming. It's going to make them uncomfortable. You see how they react. Now, there's lots of other things that the Vikings are evaluating in these quarterback prospects, and there's a whole bunch of tape that's going to be the main factor in where they rank these guys and whether they feel they're worth a draft pick. But I like what they're doing. Will it lead to them getting the quarterback of the future and nailing that? We don't know. We won't know until 2 or 3 years. But I like the thought process behind this a lot.
Well, I do too, and I love your analogy of having it as the pro days being scripted, almost like an actor would use. They've got to hit their mark on the stage. Quarterback's got to hit their mark, and the receiver, they've got to say their lines, got to hit their lines, make sure they're correct, say all the nice things, all the right, football speak, all that sort of stuff. They have to get exactly right. Now, why they're doing a private ones, you had mentioned Coach O'Connell. His exact quote is, "In real time, we don't know what they're coached." And that makes sense to me. They don't know what they were coached, coming up for the most part. So a lot of times, if you just turn on the tape and give them a clicker and have them take you through it, you can ask questions in real time and see how fast they either remember things or how fast they're digesting information in the question you're asking. How clearly and articulate can they put up that information into real tangible things that I can use as a coach for feedback in the future, right? That doesn't happen in the pro days. That happens in the one-on-ones. And he continues, I think the value of them learning basically a foreign language in a lot of ways, our system, parts of our system, that you can then go on the grass and see if they can understand how we want to set our feet and our eyes on this drop, or when we talk about pocket movement, what that looks like, and this is KOC telling us what he wants the quarterback, how he wants to move him in the pocket. Or if we talk about on schedule versus off schedule, red zone, third down, how that fits the framework, not of our system, but of the system we want to build for them. That's KOC on the football part of it. And I think that's a great, great way to go about it. And it's different. It's different than we've seen before in Minnesota. I don't remember ever seeing anything like that. The closest probably could have been when they went down to the private day, or the when Teddy Bridgewater was selected and they did the private workout. I think that was the closest. But this is something that KOC wants to do, and I think that is a good thing. But that's not all that's included in this private meeting. They're also evaluating them, like I said earlier in the week, on how they interact with people. How do they treat people? How do they treat people in the cafeteria, right? How do they treat people? They might ask them to take the coaches out to their favorite restaurant. How do they treat the wait staff and the people there? Are they friendly? Do they know them? All that sort of stuff. They're seeing the human side and how they interact. Is this guy going to be a good leader, get along with people, or is he going to be an asshole, right? Pardon my French. Is he going to be a jerk about it? Now, you can deal with some people that are like that, but do you want that as your leader as a quarterback? Well, if you end up selecting them, you want to know how you're going to go about dealing with that, how to work with that. I have no problem with people that are of that bent as long as they're consistent, right? And I think coaches would be the same way. As long as you're consistent, we can work with that. And as long as you can learn, I think this approach will pay dividends, and it's one that hasn't been done as far as I can remember. Like I said, the closest was with Teddy Bridgewater, but that was it. And I think hopefully that it will pay dividends. And you said, well, we may not find out for 3 years. I'm hoping we find out sooner than that. But I think it's a great approach, and I'm glad they're doing it. And now watch next year and the following years, the Copycat League, all the QB stuff will be done in private meetings.
And I guess one thing is that the Vikings could have went to the pro day and have a private workout too. But I think that there's so many prospects to look at, not just quarterback, but every position, right? And the Vikings have got to have their eyeballs on that. There's only so much time to do this thing right now. So I think that they're also making wise use of their resources and saying, we're not going to spend a day traveling to a pro day, a heavily scripted one, where we can't learn everything that we want to learn. We've already seen all the tape and the game stuff. We break that down. But a private workout, we can mold things and make it to mold things and have it structured the way we want it, and to learn the things that we want to learn in a not scripted, structured performance for the QB prospect.
Aaron says I need to wear some purple. Aaron, my hat's purple.
Yes.
So anyway, yes, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think we're going to have benefits more than we have in the past when it comes to draft, but we'll find out. Well, that brings you to the next topic on this. We
Also
weren't
about the
talking,
draft.
yeah, we weren't talking just quarterbacks. That first segment of In Vikings Land was quarterbacks, but there's other things they're doing, and tell us about that.
Well, just the visits that they're having with various prospects, and our Tyler Forness, as well as other outlets, are tracking the Vikings' top 30 visits. And then there's other visits too that get counted into that. Some of them are who they met with at the Senior Bowl, the private workouts that they're having with the quarterbacks, and other things. That's not just the top 30 is the guys that the Vikings are bringing into Egan specifically, and they can only bring in 30 prospects. But there's other guys that they don't bring in for top 30. But again, they've met with them at the Senior Bowl. There's the list keeps growing, and various as we get closer to the draft, this will change. It's changed as of yesterday, and sometimes there's different names that people unearth from different outlets. But there's about, I don't know, there's like they're up to the 26, 27 names that I've seen so far, and these visits, top 30 or ones that they've done at various the East West Shrine or the Senior Bowl, I think that they are very important to track for us. I think that most of these guys the Vikings will not draft, but last year in the 2023 draft, the Vikings had private workouts, or they had top 30 visits with Jordan Addison, Mekhi Blackman, and Dwayne McBride, as well as Calvin Avery, the defensive tackle from Illinois. They ended up drafting McBride, Blackman, and Addison, of course, and Avery they signed as an undrafted rookie free agent. So that was 4 guys out of their top 30 that they ended up bringing onto the team either by drafting or signing them after the draft. 2022 was not as many. Zeze Otomomoeo was one of the top 30 visits. They ended up drafting him, and Zach McLeod was another top 30, the linebacker from the U of Miami. He didn't end up making the team. He ended up making the practice squad. But those were the only 2 guys they brought in for top 30 that were part of the 90 guys in the 2022 offseason. Still important. And you look at the various guys that they brought in, I think it's what I noticed here is that, they've got the private workouts with the 5 quarterbacks. We know quarterback is a big need for us. But out of that list that you popped up there, and it's changing, I think there's 5 interior defensive linemen in there. Well, that makes sense because we know that the Vikings are not very they need some younger promising talent there to add to that room, I think, for depth-wise, or to find a stud that can start in there. That pay attention to some of those names, or all of them. One of them could be a Viking. We're also seeing that with edge. I think there's 4 on there, and that's going to change too. Again, edge, even though we signed Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard, we still need some depth and young promising talent at edge. And then the interior offensive line, I think there's 4 or 5 names on there as well. A mix of tackles, center, a couple of interior guards. So again, outside of our starting 5 and Blake Brandel and Quisenberry, we don't have a lot of depth that I feel comfortable with along the offensive line right now. So top 30, all of those different visits, those names, keep track of them. Some of those are going to be Vikings. And I think one of the names on there, Christian Boyd I just wanted to mention him because when I was looking through the various teams and all the top 30 visit trackers from other sites, he is a popular guy, Dave. This guy has so far, and we're 12 days away from the draft, he had 14 top 30 visits, including the Vikings, and the Packers and the Lions have also had him in. So within our division, there's interest in this guy, and he's a guy who's not going to be a day 1 pick, maybe not a day 2, but he'd be a day 3. But if the Vikings want this guy, they're going to get there's going to be competition for him later on in the draft.
I agree. And part of that for him may be because he's local, and a lot of the draft scouts always go local to catch games. But it's going to be interesting to see because a lot of these guys we're hoping for day 3 or as undrafted if they don't make teams like they have in the past. And hopefully they
Yes.
turn into something. That's all you can hope for. So it's going to be interesting to see how this year plays out when, as of right now, we have no day 2 picks. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be a lot of these guys that are on this list that are forecast for late day 2 than day 3 that the Vikings most likely will be targeting. So it's interesting to see for sure. Well, that brings us to the last bit, I believe, on that.
It is.
And that's Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doing his job and doing just that. So that ends theme 1 with what's happening in Vikingsland. Now on to theme 2. The Vikings Vault. Here we're going to tell a story, an interesting story.
We are, yeah.
Stefon Diggs.
Indeed, yes. Vikings Vault, this is the second time. This is a new segment Dave and I dreamed up, and this is the second time we've done it. It's for those who are new to the show or hadn't seen the previous Vikings Vault, it's a look at the history of the Vikings and looking at interesting or intriguing teams, seasons, players, coaches in Vikings history, and kind of breaking it down, telling the story, and looking at the impact that that particular team or player, coach had on the Vikings. And we're picking Stefon Diggs because, well, clearly he made news past week. He got traded from Buffalo to the Houston Texans, but a month ago we passed the 4-year anniversary of one of the biggest trades in recent Vikings history when Stefon Diggs got traded in 2020 to the Buffalo Bills from the Vikings. And myself, when that trade happened, that was a gut punch for me, Dave. I think it was for a lot of Vikings fans because I love Diggs. When we drafted him, he partly solved anyway. Yeah, he partly solved an issue that had been dogging the Vikings for over a decade, which was getting a productive wide receiver. Luckily, at the point he got drafted, Adam Thielen still was a special teams guy who wasn't playing at all on offense, really. Diggs stepped in pretty much from day one and was a
halfway through to his first season, I think, is when he came in, roughly.
Yeah. But it was a gut punch for me. I think a gut punch for a lot of Vikings fans because here was that guy in his prime, very good wide receiver, and I thought was going to be a cornerstone player for the Vikings in the future. Didn't happen, and then we ended up trading him to the Bills again in March 2020. We traded him and a 7th rounder in 2020 to the Bills, and in return we got a 2020 first rounder, number 22nd overall, a 5th rounder and a 6th rounder in 2020, and then a 4th rounder in 2021. That was our haul. So from that trade. Now, we traded him, but why did we trade them? And I think that even though we got traded in March of 2020, the genesis of the disintegration of the relationship between Diggs and the Vikings happened in 2018 when they hired John DeFilippo as the offensive coordinator for us. Mm-hmm. And if people remember, with DeFilippo as the offensive coordinator, that also happened at the time that we had just signed Kirk Cousins to the big free agent contract. He was going to come in and be the Messiah. And so with Cousins coming in, and then we had Thielen and Stefon Diggs as our wide receivers, DeFilippo just started airing it out like nobody's business in 2018. We were passing way, way more than we had in previous years under Mike Zimmer as our head coach, and even before that with Chili and then Leslie Frazier. Now, the airing it out might have been okay. It might have worked out, except The problem was that the team in 2017, with a much more balanced offense, we'd went 13-3 and lost in the NFC Championship game. In 2018, airing it out, things weren't going so well. We were a 500 ball club, not meeting expectations at all, and Mike Zimmer was pissed.
As you can see in this picture.
He did,
and DiFilippo behind him.
Yeah,
he was upset.
We just weren't running the ball enough. Eventually, Zimmer had enough. DiFilippo gets fired in December of 2018. But the problem with that for Diggs was that even though the team wasn't having as much success as it had at 13-3, Diggsy was getting the ball a lot under DiFilippo. In 2018, he caught 102 passes. He was targeted 149 times. Then in 2019, with a different OC, Kevin Stefanski, and a much more balanced offense that was kind of more tilting to Dalvin Cook at that point than Thielen and Stefon Diggs, Diggs ends up getting 64 catches, targeted 94 targets, so 55 less targets in 2019 compared to 2018. And Diggs didn't seem to like that, even though the Vikings that year were having a pretty good season, even though they made the playoffs, even though they won a playoff game on the road in New Orleans in overtime. But Diggs he did not like it. I think, in October of 2019, he missed some practices and team meetings. Then the rumors started swirling that he wanted out of Minnesota, and then he'd make cryptic social media posts every now and then. It just became clear that he wanted out of Minnesota, and the Vikings ended up forced to trade him, even though I don't think they wanted to, but they did, and he ended up in Buffalo. I think that Diggs wanted out mainly because he felt there's no way the passing game is not going to be a focal point as long as Mike Zimmer is the head coach. I'm not going to become the focal point of the offense like I feel I should be. I'm not going to be as productive as I should be. So I want to get out of here and move to a team that is going to use me in a way that I want to be used. That ended up being in Buffalo. Now, I think that's my theory on why Diggs wanted out and why it happened. The question now becomes, of course, when the trade is made and it's as big as it is, who won the trade? We now are 4 years into it, Dave. I think we can make an assessment on that. I think Dr. Proto said, he said Vikings won the trade, no ifs, ands, or buts. I think what happened here is that I don't think the Vikings won the trade. I think both teams won the trade because they got exactly what they wanted out of this. Now, the Bills, they got Diggs. They got a number one wide receiver. They got a guy who made the Pro Bowl all 4 years he's been with the Bills, caught over 100 passes all 4 years he was with the Bills, is considered one of the best wide receivers in the NFL all 4 years he's been with the Bills. They made the playoffs every year. They won a bunch of playoff games. They were to the AFC Championship game twice. So if you look at the Bills, they would say, this trade turned out exactly the way we wanted it to. We got the guy we wanted, and he performed the way we needed him to perform. And the team did well as well. On the Viking side of things, we also didn't lose the trade. I think we didn't lose it. I think we also won it because, of course, we got JJ, who has been almost just as productive as Diggs, in some cases more so. And he's younger, and at least not for much longer, but he's been cheaper than Diggs during that time. Now,
Stefon has made some money, so I'm not going
to
hold that down on him.
Nope. Now, the other guys that we got in that trade, after all the trades and the draft picks, came and went over 2020 and 2021, we ended up getting, besides Justin Jefferson, we got Cam Bynum, we got Janarius Robinson, defensive end. In the fourth round, we got Zach Davidson, a tight end from small school Southwest Missouri, I think, and Kenny Willekes, a defensive end from Michigan State. Those are the 5 guys that we got from this trade. Now, Willekes, Robinson, and Davidson didn't amount to much, but we got Justin Jefferson, all-world. No complaints there. Even if he was all we got in this trade, I think you would say it was even Steven. But we also got Cam Bynum out of this trade. And Bynum has been a solid starter for us. And so It would have been great if we could have hit on all 5 of those draft picks, or 4 of the 5. That would have been even better. But when you trade a guy like Diggs, you get Justin Jefferson, who basically replaced him, and we didn't miss a beat on that end of stuff. And you get another starter like Cam Bynum, who keeps on getting better every year. I think that's a pretty good outcome for the Vikings out of this. And Rick Spielman, people brought him up in the comments before, but arrogant, asshole, all that sort of stuff. We complain about him a lot on this show. Lots of Viking fans do, with good reason. But in this trade, with a gun to his head, having to force to trade Stefon Diggs like he did, he ended up doing okay on this one. I think, as far as the selections he made. Like I said, too bad three of the 5 didn't turn out, but 2 of them did. And one of them is the best wide receiver in the NFL, and the other guy last year is one of the best safeties in the NFL, if you believe Pro Football Focus.
And Stefon is now a Houston Texan. He got traded. Now, that obviously shows he was a little disgruntled, and we started seeing tweets this year from him up in Buffalo. Buffalo said, fine, we've had enough. We'll work a trade. The only team you can't go to is the Kansas City Chiefs. And so they made a deal with the Houston Texans. And he's now in Houston.
Yes. And ironic that the Vikings were indirectly involved in that trade too, because
they were.
The Texans, one of the second round, or one of the assets they used to get Diggs, was the one that the Texans got from us when we made the trade to get their 23rd overall pick in this year's draft. So the Vikings and Stefon Diggs just are linked.
And that's supposedly why they approached Kwesi to make the trade, was to get the draft capital so they could trade for Stefon Diggs.
I hadn't heard that.
Yes, I've heard that this week, and I've heard that a couple times. That's why the Texans approached the Vikings, because they needed that for the trade. They didn't want to give up a first for him, and they needed that, and it worked for both of us again. It worked for Stefon, and it worked for the Vikings. So
it'd be kind of funny if this trade, which involved one of our draft picks that the Bills used, the Houston used to get Diggs, if that, and then if this all leads to us trading up with Houston to get the 23, if that ended up, we get our Josh Allen.
Yeah, that would be something.
Somehow. Yeah,
that would be something. But that it's an interesting story in Vikings history. That's why we stuck it in the vault, because there's ties everywhere, and it's something that if you haven't been following for a long time, it's one of those weird stories that, we'll probably tell again 20 years from now, type of deal. So it's good. Thank you for bringing this one up. I appreciate it. That brings us to theme 3. And we're looking at the safeties. And we got the king of them on the screen right now.
We do. Guy who should be making the Hall of Fame when he's all said and done.
Hopefully.
I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, but
we did show
over that a couple
of months ago. All I got to do is look back. Yeah. We made an argument that he should be there.
Yes. We're getting down to the end, Dave, which is good because the draft is coming up soon. But this is the second last positional unit. We'll do special teams next week. That'll be our last one, and the specialists. But we're looking at the safeties. This is one of our regular segments during the off season, is looking at the Vikings various positions, and how they're, what it looks like now and what it might look like after free agency in the draft. Well, free agency is over. The Vikings didn't do anything in free agency. Well, I should say
it's not over. The first and second wave of free agency is over. Third wave is still to come after the draft.
That's what I consider free agency to be, the first and second wave. But
we got to fill the rest of the roster with the cheap veterans.
Is true.
Maybe like Andy Dalton.
Yeah,
or not Andy Dalton, but Dalton Reisner.
Dalton Reisner, yes, that's right. We do have an issue at left guard that we have to resolve, and we have not resolved it yet. But That's another position, which we've already done. We're doing safeties today. And this is the unit that you alluded to in the intro that is, I think, what is one of the best units that the Vikings have. It's got the best amount of, the best amount of talent, and there's actually some
Top to
depth
bottom
there,
talent.
which
Yep.
top to bottom, which we do not, enjoy in some other positions. But and because of that, we weren't really very active so far in free agency at the safety position. We did two things. One of them was a major move, and the other one was a little bit minor move, and we'll talk about that in a bit too. But Harrison Smith, this was a bit of the Vikings brought him back, and Harrison Smith decided, I'm not going to retire. I'm going to come back in 2024 to play again. That was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought, we talked about it before when we did the Hall of Fame thing with Harrison Smith, was that I thought either A, he's going to retire, or B, the Vikings are going to release him and get some salary cap relief that way, because he's going to be turning 35. He actually did in February, and last year was not one of his stronger seasons. And maybe it's time to cut bait with Hitman, as great as he's been. And we actually have a room, like I just mentioned, that has some good depth there and some talent there that could absorb a loss of the Hitman. But the Vikings did not do that. They brought Harrison Smith back at a reduced price, and they didn't have to waive him. So now his salary cap hit is going to be just about $9 million. It was going to be $19.2 million until he restructured. So it brings Hitman back after he decided he was going to take another go at it, and he comes back at a much more palatable price for the Vikings. So good news all around. He gets to play his 14th season, I think, in the NFL. It'll be
something like that.
14.
Yeah, 13 or 14. He's up there.
As I said, he turned 35 on February the 2nd. He gets to build on his great Vikings career in 2024, build on a hopefully Hall of Fame resume. Now, the only issue with this is that Hitman last year, pretty quiet year for him. He ended up getting used like we thought he was going to be used, Dave, when in the Brian Flores offense. Flores had him up in the box a whole lot more than he had been under Ed Donatel. He was blitzing Hitman frequently, along with Josh Metellus. But the results, I said, were pretty quiet. Other than the Carolina game where he had the 3 sacks and was a big reason we won our first game of the year. Hitman a lot of time wasn't as noticeable as he'd been in other years. This was that he didn't have an interception last year. That's only the second time during his career that he has not had an interception. And again, this was despite being used like we thought he would be. So is he starting to hit is Father Time finally caught up with Hitman? It happens to everybody, particularly when you're 34, 35 years old. And I think Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores have recognized that as well. Kevin O'Connell said a couple of weeks ago that, yes, they brought Hitman back. They're glad to have him back, but that they're really hoping, and they plan actually, to not have him out there as much as he has been in previous years. Like last year, he played almost every defensive snap. Connell says that's not going to be happening in 2024. So it might be a bit of a 50-50 or 60-40, 70-30 split in defensive snaps between Hitman and somebody else. So that it's looking like Hitman will be back, but he won't be playing as much as he had in previous years. And I think that's wise at his age. You want to keep him fresh, you want to keep him healthy, and you also want to have a succession plan for him when he's gone. And to do that, you need somebody else to show that they can play. So Hitman's back. We'll see what kind of an impact he has and how much he's going to play in 2024. I think it will be reduced, but depending on how the Vikings defense plays, it might not be as reduced as maybe some people are thinking. You love Hitman's experience. He's got the football IQ. He'll be a coach on the field for you, even if he's lost a bit of that athletic ability and isn't quite the impact player he once was. A guy opposite of him who's going to be starting we got Cam Bynum, a young guy who keeps on getting better. If you believe Pro Football Focus, he was one of the top ranked safeties last year. Now he was used in a way that quite opposite by Flores compared to Hitman, right? Bynum I can't remember him blitzing at all last year. He wasn't up at the line of scrimmage in the box nearly as much. He was the deep safety, making sure that we don't get beat over the top, keeping guys in line. But he did it very well. He thrived in the Brian Flores defense, just like quite a few players did. And again, it's a big year for him. He's coming into his fourth year, contract year. I'm expecting him to continue to be a strong player for our defense, and I think he's going to have another strong year next year and get a contract extension from the Vikings. So liking having Cam Bynum back. Josh Metellus. We know Brian Flores used 3 safeties a ton last year. It was all pretty much part of the base defense for the Vikings, and Metellus was a revelation. We talked about it a few times before. A do-it-all guy, playing edge, linebacker, nickel corner, safety. Sometimes he was even an interior defensive lineman on a few snaps.
He lined up on the line, yes.
Yeah.
And that is very much what Hitman has done a couple times as well. Mm-hmm. Especially in his past, because Hitman was so good at blitzing, and he'd come right up on the line. Well, Metellus is learning from that. And I think if you're going to do a 1-for-1 mentorship sort of ish, there's a lot of Hitman going into Metellus and how Metellus plays more than Cam Bynum, because I think Bynum's your back safety guy, right?
Yeah.
He's your backstop. So I like it. I like it so far. Hey, Brian Flores has done some great stuff with that.
And again, Metellus has been the guy that we heard he was going to get a big role with the Vikings defense last year, and he did get a big role, and he took it and he ran with it. And he was an exceptional blitzer, very strong tackler, held up well in coverage. And again, a young guy, keeps getting better. It'll be interesting to see, is there more that Brian Flores has planned for him? What kind of different things is he going to do with Metellus in 2024 that opponents did not see in 2023? That's going to be the next, I think, part of the evolution in Josh Metellus as a football player and the multi-talented guy that he is. But we feel really good about him being on the team. Also signed to a 2-year extension for peanuts compared when you look at the kind of impact he had on the defense last year. So happy with Metellus, Bynum, and having Hitman back. If those are your top 3 safeties, you're doing pretty well. Now, who are the guys that are going to be behind them? Who could be the guy that subs in for Hitman when he's not playing as much? Well, this could be one of the guys. Theo Jackson. He's been the other free agent activity that we've done at the safety position, because we re-signed him very early in free agency to a modest one-year deal. I liked what I saw from Jackson when he did play last year. He was the 4th safety on their depth chart. That so far has not changed. It might in the offseason, but he's right now is in line to play a lot more on the defensive side than he did in 2023 and have a larger role on the Vikings defense. And I'm good with that at this point because again, I like what I've seen from him. I think when he's been in there, he has not looked lost. He's made solid contributions, and more playing time will show out more of his talents, I think. However, if it's not Jackson, a guy who could jump him in the depth chart right now, I think, is Jay Ward. Last year, Ward, you'll remember, 4th rounder out of LSU, converted corner who was a corner to start at LSU in his college career and then got moved to safety midway through. We knew he was going to be a developmental guy last year and play mostly on special teams, and that's what he did. He did get in a bit on defense, especially the last couple of games. Not too much to learn to take from that. Just so few snaps for him. But Ward's had a reputation in college as, again, high football IQ, a very coach on the field, a guy who's a very tough tackler and willing tackler, and he has that versatility that Flores likes at the safety position, in that a guy who was a former cornerback and has the coverage skills, and you could slide inside in the slot if you need to do that. So if Ward has a big off season in OTAs, in the mandatory workouts, in training camp, and in preseason, he could jump over Jackson in the depth chart, and maybe he's the guy that's playing when Hitman is off the field and taking a break.
I love that they're competing back there, because they are. I mean, every last one of them, besides the, quote, 3 starters, right, if you consider Metellus a starter, is competing. because they have to, because we're going to get to the next person who you would think would be there competing, but nobody's seen him.
No, that's right. And F. Matty Man talks about make or break year for Lewis Seen, and you'll notice that we hadn't talked about Seen yet, and there's a reason for that, because he's at the bottom of the depth chart right now, and very disappointing. Your first overall draft pick in the 2022 draft, but I'm just it's very disappointing and also worrying to me that in 2 years, even though he had that catastrophic broken leg early in his rookie season that wiped out a lot of that, but even before that, he wasn't getting on the field. And last year, we were told he's completely healthy from the leg injury. He, in most games, he did not even dress for the Vikings. He was in a tracksuit on the sideline. So if you're the top pick, your team's a top pick in a draft, a first rounder, mind you, the last pick in the first round, but still a first rounder. And in 2 years, you can not get on the field at all. And a lot of games, you are not even dressed. That tells me that you are not a good player. You're a bust. And I have very little hope that Lewis Seen is going to be able to turn things around. Now, the talent is there. We see it from time to time in preseason. We see flashes of it, of the physicality, of the coverage ability, of his, of that sort of thing, the speed, the strength. But he just hasn't figured out at the pro level right now with the Vikings. And I feel that you're going to see a lot of Seen, particularly in the preseason. He's going to play a lot. But I think that's partly the Vikings want to see if he's going to get it, if he can have an impact, and the opportunity is there for him, if he does, to move up the depth chart quickly. But I think a lot of that playing a lot is also going to be because the starters aren't going to be playing, and also the Vikings want to advertise him and showcase him to other teams who might think they can be the one to get the talents that Seen had in college out of him, and that they might be able to convince a team to give up a draft asset in the 2025 draft for Seen. So I think that he's going to be trade bait after when the final roster cuts come down. I don't feel good about him being a Viking in 2024. Actually,
well, he may be trade bait in the draft.
Maybe
coming up. Somebody that runs a Fangio style defense, and Lewis Seen was specifically targeted for a Fangio style defense, and his style of play, where he's crashing with speed, fits that style of defense more than it does Brian Flores's. That could be enticing during the draft if somebody needs a sweetener or something like that he may during the draft. Now, don't get your hopes up, everybody. I doubt it's going to happen, but there is a possibility of that happening, because I do believe the Vikings, they don't just want to cut him. Everybody's attached to that first player they draft, right? We know Zimmer was with Anthony Barr, but and yes, we hear that he can't learn the playbook. That's the rumors. But if he's not going to make it, at least try to get something from him. And everybody who's drafted in the first round always gets multiple chances in the league, no matter what. There's very few that flush out almost immediately. I doubt Seen will, but if we can get something for him, either in the draft or towards the end, or if he takes that step, maybe he got with somebody. Maybe it's a learning thing. If you're talking about the playbook, maybe he's dyslexic. Boy, my tongue is. But maybe he's learned a different way to learn it, and now he's getting it. There's different ways to deal with how people ingest knowledge and how they apply it and learn it. And so we might see a different version of him when it comes to OTAs and training camp. We don't know, but we'll see. But as you can see, he's a first rounder in there, has tons of high hopes, hasn't lived up to them yet, but he's at the bottom of that safety room depth chart. And that depth chart, top to bottom, is thick with talent. And that is a good thing for your Minnesota Vikings. We wish every position group was that thick, and it's not, especially the O-line and D-line. I would love that, but so.
And some good comments there about seeing what's wrong with him and what might be the issue. I think Anthony McDaniel was talking about how he wonders if there's some character issues with Scene, and we did hear about that from Doogie Wilson early in this January or late in December, I think, where he was talking about how Scene isn't interacting with his teammates very much on the sideline, kind of alone. And it feels to me, if you watch some of the post-game locker room speeches from Kevin O'Connell in the past, you can see I've seen Scene lurking in the background in those, looking like he doesn't want to be there, like he doesn't care what Kevin O'Connell's saying. And that not surprising, because his career has not gone the way that he expected it to go, I think, and maybe even thinks that he should be much higher on the depth chart than he is, and he feels he's getting a raw deal. But I don't think Scene's not going to be very happy with his lot in life right now with the Vikings. And I don't think the Vikings are very happy with him either. So a divorce could be coming, but he's got an off season to change that, and it could happen. The talent is there, as people pointed out.
And he's got the speed. He's always had that.
Yes, he's always had that.
He did it, George.
Yes, he did. Now, we talked about how the safety room has got a lot of talent, top to bottom. And so the depth is there, the talent is there. We don't have a lot of worries about it. And that is why I don't think that we're going to see a safety drafted by the Vikings. We're going to pick one up. Now, the caveat with that is that if Brian Flores continues to use a lot of safeties in his base defense, then you want that room to be full of talent, and because you're using a lot of them, and if one or two guys gets hurt, you got to bring somebody in who can get on the field and still be as competent as the guys that they're replacing. You need good depth for that. You got good talent for that, and injuries can really run through that. But I feel right now that I don't really see the Vikings drafting a safety. They'll certainly bring some in as undrafted rookie free agents, as they will at all positions. But if they are going to draft anybody, again, likely in day three, almost guaranteed. And I think you want to be looking at guys that either have coverage skills, and you're looking for guys who are safeties in college now, who were corners either in high school or previously in college as well. The Vikings seem to like that. Cam Bynum was a corner at Cal. They converted him to safety as soon as he became a pro. Lewis Cine, we just talked about, he played coverage a lot in the slot, covering wide receivers quite a bit at college at Georgia. His coverage skills were one of the things that really attracted a lot of teams, including the Vikings, to him. And then last year, Jay Ward, we selected him. Of course, I mentioned earlier, he'd been a corner his first year or two at LSU and got switched to safety midway through his college career. So Brian Flores, the Vikings in general, they seem to really value safeties who have coverage abilities and maybe were corners in a previous life. And they also really value safeties that are do it all, have all kinds, can cover, tackle. Everybody would like that, but some teams favor more the in the box physical guys than the coverage guys. The Vikings seem to want a safety who can do all of those things. So you've got to be looking at, I think, college prospects who have that ability. And a couple that come to mind, these are just names, would be Jalen Simpson from Auburn. He's considered a bit thin, but he was a former corner. And Chase Williams from San Jose State is a guy who's considered one of those do-it-all, can cover, good tackler, that sort of thing. But just a couple of guys to keep our eye on. They're expected that those Simpson and Williams are likely day 3 selections. So the Vikings would have some draft picks to target one of those guys if they so choose. And they've also met with a couple of prospects so far. One, you just showed one, Josh Proctor from Ohio State, who's like a tall, rangy guy. And they also had visited somebody, I think, from Brigham Young University, a safety.
Millard Bradford from TCU.
Okay, yeah, blew that, but TCU. So they've looked at a couple, not as heavily as they've looked at other positions, but again, if Brian Flores seems to really like safeties and he really likes playing them in this defense, so that means that them drafting one on day 3 is certainly not out of the question.
I agree. It's that they're going to want to put a couple more in there just to build it up and have somebody on practice squad or special teams. Now, special teams is going to be rearranged a little bit this year because of the new kickoff rule. But those guys, that's where they cut their teeth, and they can make a living doing that. Interesting conversations going on in the chat. We talk about the tampering. How that will turn out. Will the NFL rule against the Atlanta Falcons? It's going to be interesting. We talked about that last week here. I don't know.
Yeah, no, the tampering stuff. I did read there was, I can't remember what it was, but there was an article looking at what the possibility of that was, and because I think Mike Florio is a Viking fan, is fanning the waves that the Vikings may get or should get. The NFL should compensate the Vikings, and he suggested, I think, swapping
11 and 8
first 11 and 8, yeah, with the Atlanta and the Vikings, which another article I wrote.
Yeah,
not that I wrote, but go ahead.
There's precedent for that. That's where he takes that from. There's precedent for that. When the last time tampering got caught, the two teams, say it's Baltimore and Arizona, they agreed to a pick swap, a settlement, as they called it.
But not in the first round. They swapped third rounders. And
but we'll see what happens. And that was only announced 5 minutes before the draft started, that resolution. So it may have to wait till Thursday night before we hear anything, if the NFL does anything. And the other tampering time, I think it was New England or somebody like that, they took picks away from the offending team. But the team that had their player tampered and taken away from them got nothing. So it's the NFL takes each offense case by case, and they deal out their justice the way they feel at the time. It's very political, and it's who's it? McKay, from the owner, is on the competition committee of Atlanta, or the Atlanta Falcons owner or GM is on the competition committee, and generally when Atlanta gets in trouble for pumping in crowd noise or whatever, they tend to get just a wrist slap when everybody else doesn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how it happens. Ryan says 11 for 8 is a slap on the wrist. 23 for 8 is what it should be. Hey, I'd take it. I'd take it in a heartbeat. It's going to be interesting to see.
That would make trading up a lot less costly for the Vikings
if they just give us the 8th. I'd take that. They have 3 first.
Yeah. Somehow I don't think that's happening, Dave.
I don't think so either. But it's going to be interesting. Hey, what a great show!
That's right. Yeah. Atlanta might lose something, but don't count on the Vikings getting anything out of this tampering. I think that Dave and I would concur with that. If anything like that, happens at all, certainly, maybe they get something taken away from them, but it might be a day 3 pick, not a day 1 or day 2 pick.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Depending on how severe the NFL feels the tampering was.
We've had a new viewer, just a Super Bowl Vike, has been promoting Justin Hall. Hey, you and our buddy Tyler Fornes, who will have a show tomorrow night, the Real Forno Show, at 6 o'clock Central. Don't know he hasn't told me what he's going to talk about tomorrow night, but it should be interesting. And if you want to check out his work, go to the Sporting News and type in Sporting News /Tyler Fornes, and you're getting all the Vikings stuff while they're building the team sites back up onto the Sporting News. And you'll find some good work there. Like Darren referenced earlier, he's tracking all the visits as well. It's pretty cool to see who's coming and going at Egan. So I highly encourage you to do that. Any last words there, Darren?
Well, I just want to let Matty Man know that it is water I'm drinking, not moonshine. I drank a few too many beers last night, which is why I'm drinking the water today.
Hey, smart move. You get a little wisdom as we get older. So hopefully. But anyways, with that, what do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!